John had always felt an emptiness in his life. Ever since he had moved to the city for work, the walls of his small apartment had begun to feel more like a prison than a home. His days were filled with monotonous routines. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep. There was no one to share a meal with, no one to talk to about his day. And it wasn't just the work that drained him, it was the loneliness. That was when he first heard about the Alien Companion program. It was a new and somewhat controversial service. The program allowed humans to purchase an alien companion, someone from another planet, who would stay with them, fulfill their needs, and even offer companionship. John wasn't sure what to think of it at first. The idea seemed strange, but there was a certain intrigue about it. After months of feeling isolated, he decided to look into it. The brochure was sleek and futuristic, promising a world of possibilities. The aliens were said to be highly intelligent, beautiful, and able to adapt to their human companions' needs. The companions were not just for physical assistance. They could also provide emotional support, listen when needed, and, if the buyer chose, even become life partners. John was skeptical. It felt like buying a pet, but more human. However, the idea of having someone around, even if they were from another world, appealed to him. After some thought and not wanting to face another lonely evening, he made the decision to go ahead with it. The process was quick and easy. John was shown a variety of companions, each one different in appearance, size, and background. But one stood out to him. She was a young alien woman with pale blue skin, soft, delicate features, and a serene expression. She had large, slightly pointed ears, typical of her species, and a presence that seemed calm and welcoming. Her name was Lyra. John didn't know much about the different species, but there was something about her that felt right. He made the purchase and arranged for her to be delivered to his apartment the very next day. As the day of the delivery approached, John felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He didn't know what to expect, but he imagined that it would be like having a servant, or at best a roommate. He tried to push away any expectations and just focused on getting through the first meeting. When the delivery came, John was surprised to find that the alien wasn't accompanied by any sort of escort. She was simply dropped off at his front door, and the delivery driver handed him a small, official-looking package with instructions. With a quick nod, the driver left, and John was left standing in the doorway, staring at the woman who was now his responsibility. Lyra was just standing there waiting for him to invite her in. She didn't say a word, but her calm presence immediately made John feel at ease. Come in," John said awkwardly, stepping aside to let her enter. Lyra stepped through the door with a grace that John had never seen before. She didn't look uncomfortable, nor did she seem out of place. In fact, she looked as though she belonged there. There was no hesitation in her movements. She didn't appear nervous or uneasy, even though this was her first time in a human home. Once inside, Lyra looked around the small apartment, taking in the sparse decor. It wasn't much, just a couch, a small coffee table, a few shelves, and a desk with a laptop on it. John had no idea how to start. He cleared his throat and said, "I guess you can sit down if you want." Lyra didn't immediately sit, but instead she looked at him with a soft smile. "Thank you," she said in a calm, musical voice. Her words weren't forced or mechanical, as he had expected. There was warmth in her tone, something human. She seemed happy, almost too happy for someone who had just been dropped off as part of a transaction. John was taken aback by the sincerity in her eyes. "So, I guess we should get to know each other," he mumbled, feeling a little silly. He had never done this before, and the situation was a lot more real than he had expected. Lyra's eyes sparkled with interest, and she smiled again, this time more warmly. "I'd like that," she said. "Where shall we start?" John felt a small laugh escape him. This wasn't at all what he had imagined. He thought he would be the one asking the questions, setting the rules, but here she was, being completely genuine and polite. For the first time in months, John felt something other than the weight of loneliness. There was a lightness to the air now, something that hadn't been there before. It was as though the very presence of Lyra was filling the gaps he hadn't even realized were there. "So," John said, his voice a bit more confident now. "What do you like to do?" Lyra looked around the room thoughtfully, then turned back to him with a smile. "I enjoy observing. Your world is so new to me. I want to understand it better." John couldn't help but smile. "I think I can help with that." The next few days with Lyra felt like an odd dream. John had expected their interactions to be formal, transactional, and even a little awkward. After all, she was an alien, bought from a program designed to cater to human needs. But everything was different. She wasn't just following orders. She was genuinely engaged in what was happening around her. On their second day together, John found himself sitting across from her at the kitchen table. He had made coffee, the best he could manage with his limited skills. Lyra, sitting silently, was watching him with that calm, serene expression she always wore. It was as if everything she did was measured and full of purpose, even when it seemed simple. "Here," John said, offering her a cup of coffee. "I hope it's not too strong. It's the best I can do." Lyra took the cup, her delicate fingers wrapping around the handle. "Thank you, John," she replied, her voice smooth and almost melodic. She took a sip, her eyes closing slightly, as she tasted the warmth. "It's different," she said, clearly thinking about her words. "But it's pleasant." John smiled. She wasn't just saying that to be polite. She truly seemed to enjoy it. It made him feel good, like he was actually doing something right. "So, what's it like where you're from?" John asked, hoping to learn more about her world. He had been curious about her ever since he had seen her picture, but now he was even more intrigued. Lyra set her cup down gently, her expression turning thoughtful. "It's a place of peace," she began slowly. "My people value harmony and understanding. We do not seek conflict. Our homes are full of greenery, and we live in balance with nature. It's not perfect, but we've learned to live in a way that respects everything around us." John leaned forward, fascinated. "That sounds beautiful." "It is," Lyra said with a soft smile. "But it is also very different from Earth. I can sense a great deal of energy here. Your world is full of life, but it's not always peaceful. Your people are complex." John chuckled, feeling a bit of pride despite himself. "Yeah, we're a bit messy sometimes," he admitted, "but we've got a lot of potential. I think that's what makes humans different." Lyra nodded, her eyes meeting his. "I think you're right. The potential for both creation and destruction is present in all species. What matters is how you choose to use it." The conversation shifted from one topic to another, from their respective homes to their favorite foods. John learned that Lyra had a deep appreciation for simple things. Her favorite food was a fruit from her planet that she described as sweet and soft, but she also liked the food on Earth. She seemed to enjoy trying new things, even if she didn't fully understand them at first. As the days passed, John couldn't help but notice how Lyra seemed to adapt so easily to his world. She would ask questions about everything, eager to learn about human customs and daily routines. And she didn't just ask because it was her job to. She genuinely wanted to know. She had a natural curiosity about everything, from the way humans interacted to the technolo they used. John found himself explaining things he had never really thought about before, like how smartphones worked, why people watched TV shows, or how humans communicated with each other in different ways. He started to realize that, even though he had brought her here to fill a void in his life, she was, in many ways, teaching him as well. One evening after a long day, they sat on the couch together, watching a documentary about the oceans of Earth. Lyra was quietly taking in the images of marine life, her eyes wide with wonder. John glanced at her and saw that she was completely absorbed in what she was seeing. "This is amazing," she whispered, as a school of colorful fish swam through vibrant coral reefs on the screen. "So much life in one place. We do not have such things where I'm from." John smiled, leaning back into the couch. "Yeah, Earth is full of surprises. You just have to look closely." Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. I've been looking, and I'm finding more than I expected. Her words caught him off guard, and he felt a warmth spread through him. For the first time, he realized that Lyra wasn't just here to serve him. She wasn't here just because it was her job. She was here because she was curious, because she wanted to learn, because she was genuinely happy to be with him. It was then that John understood something important. She wasn't just an alien companion. She was becoming a friend. He had expected their time together to be a quiet, empty arrangement. He thought he would go about his life, and she would simply be a part of it, performing tasks and keeping him company. But this was different. Lyra was more than just a figure in his apartment. She was someone who, despite all odds, was beginning to care about the world she found herself in. And about him. I'm glad you're here, John said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra met his gaze, her eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the room. I'm glad too, John. I've never experienced anything like this before. The connection between them, though unexpected, was beginning to grow in ways John hadn't anticipated. And as the evening passed, he found himself looking forward to what the future would bring. Knowing that Lyra was more than just his companion, she was becoming a part of his life in a way he never expected. As the days passed, John found himself spending more and more time with Lyra. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, even though she wasn't human. Her genuine curiosity about the world and her peaceful demeanor brought a new light into his life. But there was still so much he didn't know about her, about where she came from and who she really was. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, John decided to ask her more about her home. It had been a question lingering in his mind for days and now seemed like the right time. Lyra, he began, you've told me a little about your world, but I still don't know much. Can you tell me more? What's it like there? Lyra looked at him, her soft eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. She seemed to think for a moment before responding, her voice as calm as ever. My world is a place of balance, she said. Everything we do, every decision we make, is focused on maintaining harmony with nature. Our cities blend seamlessly with the environment, and we live in peace with all living things. There is no war, no conflict. John listened intently, but the more she spoke, the more he realized how different her world was from his own. His planet was filled with constant changes, battles, and struggles. The idea of a society without violence or strife seemed almost impossible to him. Sounds perfect, he said softly, glancing away. But I imagine it's also hard to leave, right? To be so far from home. Lyra nodded, her face softening. Yes, it was difficult at first. Being here on Earth is like being in a strange dream. I didn't understand your world, your ways. Everything is so chaotic. But I have learned to adapt. I'm grateful for this opportunity to experience something new. John noticed the faint sadness in her eyes. It wasn't just the alien in her, it was the feeling of displacement. The feeling of being far away from everything she had ever known. He wanted to do something, anything to make her feel more at home. But he wasn't sure how. For the first time, he realized that her happiness wasn't just a result of her being in this role. She wasn't just here to serve him. She was here too, to learn, to experience, and maybe even to find something she couldn't have on her home planet. Is there something you miss the most? John asked carefully. He wasn't sure if he should ask such a personal question, but his curiosity got the best of him. Lyra was silent for a moment, and for a brief second, John thought she wouldn't answer. But then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. I miss the stars, she said. The sky on my world is filled with countless stars, and each one represents a story, a memory. When I look up, I feel connected to everything that has ever existed. Here, the sky is different. The stars are distant, and I don't feel that same connection. John felt a pang in his chest. He couldn't imagine being so far from home, surrounded by a sky that felt unfamiliar and strange. He understood in that moment that Lyra wasn't just a companion in a contract. She was a living being with emotions, memories, and a past that she carried with her, even if she didn't speak about it often. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't realize how hard it must be." Lyra smiled gently, shaking her head. "There's no need to apologize. I've chosen this life for now, and I'm learning to find beauty in what's here, even if it's not like home. I've learned to enjoy the quiet moments, like this one with you." John felt a warmth spread through him. He hadn't expected to become so close to her so quickly. At first he had simply thought of Lyra as a companion, someone to fill the silence in his life. But now, as he looked at her, he realized that they were becoming friends, even partners in a way. "I think you've taught me something," John said. "I've been so focused on everything I don't have in life, friends, family, a purpose. But maybe it's the little things that matter, like the quiet moments, or just being with someone who understands." Lyra's eyes brightened. "Exactly, life is full of little moments. And if we are open to them, we can find happiness in the simplest things." John smiled, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. He knew his life had changed. It wasn't just about the companionship anymore. It was about understanding, growth, and connection. Lyra had shown him that even in the most unlikely of circumstances, there was beauty to be found. As the evening went on, the two of them sat together, watching the last light of the day fade. For once, John didn't feel alone. He didn't feel lost. He had found something more important than just a companion. He had found a friendship, a bond that, despite their differences, felt deeper than anything he had experienced before. Lyra, too, seemed to be at peace. She wasn't just going through the motions, she was truly present, experiencing this strange new world with him. And in that moment, John realized that the happiness she had was real. It wasn't just a result of her role, but because, in some way, she had found a place where she belonged. And maybe, just maybe, she had found that place with him. As the days turned into weeks, John began to notice something that had not been apparent at first. Lyra, his alien companion, though always kind and pleasant, began to show signs of unease. It wasn't in her words. No, she still smiled, still showed an interest in human life, and still seemed content. But there were subtle changes that John couldn't ignore. One evening, after they had spent the afternoon in the park, walking among the people and watching the sunset, Lyra grew quiet as they made their way back to the apartment. John noticed she was walking slower than usual, her gaze distant, almost lost. Her usual calm demeanor seemed to slip for a moment. "Lyra?" John asked, his voice gentle, noticing the slight frown that tugged at her lips. "Is something wrong?" Lyra glanced up at him as if shaken from her thoughts. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but John could tell she wasn't. The smile she gave him was forced, and it didn't reach her eyes. John wasn't sure what to make of it, but he felt a growing concern. Over the next few days, he watched her closely. She still asked about Earth's customs, still enjoyed small moments like watching TV or listening to music, but sometimes she would retreat into herself. It was as though there was something she wasn't saying. One afternoon, as John prepared lunch, he found Lyra standing at the window staring out into the city below. Her expression was blank, as though she was seeing something far beyond the buildings and streets. "Lyra?" John called, walking over to her. He stood beside her, his gaze following hers, but seeing only the same view. "What are you thinking about?" She turned to him slowly, and for the first time John saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes, a sadness that she had always hidden so well. "I was thinking about home," she said softly. "I miss it sometimes. I miss the stars. I miss my family." John's heart sank. He had known that she missed her home, but hearing her admit it so openly made it feel real. "I can't imagine how hard that must be," he said quietly, his voice filled with sympathy. "But you've been so strong. You're not alone here. I'm here for you." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you, John. I appreciate your kindness, but sometimes even the kindest gestures can't fill the space where something is missing." Her words lingered in the air between them. It was clear now that her struggles weren't just about adjusting to a new world? It was more than that. She was battling the quiet loneliness of being far away from everything she had known. No matter how much she tried to embrace Earth, no matter how much she enjoyed her time with John, there were moments when the distance from her home felt unbearable. John didn't know how to help her with that. He had never been in her shoes. He had never been so far from everything familiar, but he realized that just being there, letting her share her feelings, was important. She wasn't asking for solutions. She was just asking for someone to listen, someone to understand. The next few days, John kept an eye on her, trying to be more aware of her needs. He noticed that she became quieter, sometimes withdrawing into herself after their outings. It was as if the more she adapted to Earth, the more she missed her home. And it wasn't just homesickness, it was something deeper, something that John couldn't fix. One evening, after they had eaten dinner together, John decided to take a different approach. Instead of asking about her feelings directly, he simply offered her comfort in the form of shared activities. He brought out an old board game from his closet, a simple game of chess. It was something he had always enjoyed as a child, and maybe it would bring some normalcy to her day. "Hey, do you know how to play chess?" he asked casually. Lyra raised an eyebrow, the faintest trace of a smile appearing on her lips. "I have seen it played before, but I don't know the rules." "Perfect," John said, setting up the board. "I'll teach you. It's a good way to clear your mind. No pressure." They played in silence for a while, the only sound being the quiet click of the pieces on the board. John noticed that for the first time in days, Lyra seemed focused, her eyes bright with concentration. It was as if the weight of the world had temporarily lifted from her shoulders. As the game went on, they laughed at each other's mistakes, and slowly, Lyra began to open up again. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She shared small pieces of her culture with him, explaining how different games were played back on her planet, games that were more about communication than competition. "I've learned a lot about your world," Lyra said as she moved her piece on the board. "And you've taught me so much about your people, but there's still so much more I want to understand." John smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "We've got plenty of time for that," he said. "We can learn from each other one step at a time." As the night wore on, John realized that sometimes it wasn't about solving problems or finding answers. It was about simply being there. He might not be able to take away her homesickness or the feeling of longing she carried with her, but he could give her a sense of peace in small ways. A quiet game, a comforting presence, and the promise that she wasn't alone. Lyra may have been far from home, but in that moment, with John sitting across from her, she didn't feel quite so alone anymore. Over the following weeks, John noticed a change in Lyra. She had become more settled in her role, and their relationship had transformed from a mere companionship into something deeper, something real. They had built a friendship, and even though she was still learning about Earth, John was now learning about her in ways he had never expected. They spent hours talking about their worlds, their histories, and their dreams. Lyra shared stories of her home planet, of peaceful landscapes and a society built on mutual respect. John, in turn, told her about Earth, its struggles, its beauty, its challenges. They both found comfort in sharing, but there was still a gap that neither of them could bridge. One afternoon, as they sat on the couch reading, John glanced over at Lyra. She had a peaceful look on her face, but he noticed something was different. There was a quiet energy around her, as if she were lost in thought again. "Lyra, you okay?" John asked, closing his book. Lyra looked up at him, her large eyes soft but distant. She smiled faintly. "I'm fine, John. Just thinking." "About what?" he asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "About how far I've come, how much I've adapted. I never thought I would feel this way. Earth is so strange. But at the same time, it's beautiful. And I'm learning, not just about your world, but about myself too." John nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had noticed that she had been more thoughtful recently, even contemplative. Something was changing in her, something more than just the adjustments to her new life. She wasn't just filling the role of a companion anymore, she was evolving. "I'm glad you're here," John said quietly. "You're not just helping me, you know. You're teaching me too." Lyra turned her gaze to him, her smile deepening. "You've given me a space to be more than what I thought I was. I didn't know I could feel so much." The words struck John in a way he hadn't expected. Lyra wasn't just a companion. She wasn't just fulfilling an assignment. She had grown in ways he hadn't fully realized. She was finding her place, both in his world and within herself. But that wasn't the only change that had occurred. Lyra's happiness was no longer a mask, a result of fulfilling her role. She was genuinely happy, more so than when she first arrived. Her joy wasn't just in the small things anymore, like the sunsets or the games. It was in the moments they shared together. She found joy in being seen for who she was, not just as a product of an alien program. One evening, after a long walk through the park, they returned to the apartment, both tired but content. As they sat on the couch, John felt the need to ask something that had been on his mind for days. "Lyra," he began, "I know you've adapted so much already, but is there something more you want? You've been here for a while now, and I want to make sure you're really okay." Lyra paused, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment she didn't speak. She seemed to be considering his words, weighing them carefully. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "There is one thing," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about it. It's something I didn't expect to feel." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to stay here. Not because I have to, but because I want to. This, what we have, it's real. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at home." John was speechless. He had suspected that Lyra was growing attached to Earth, to him. But to hear her say it aloud, to express her desire to stay, it caught him off guard. He had never thought that their relationship could go beyond the initial arrangement. But as he looked at her, he realized that his feelings had changed too. He had started to care for her in ways he hadn't imagined. It wasn't just about companionship anymore. It was about something deeper, something more genuine. "Are you sure?" John asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to." Lyra nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm sure. I've learned more in the time I've spent here than I ever expected, and I don't want to leave. I want to be with you, John." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment everything seemed to pause. The weight of the decision, the depth of what they were saying, settled between them. It wasn't just about living together anymore. It was about sharing a life, about building something that neither of them had expected. John reached out and took her hand, his heart beating faster than usual. "I never thought I'd hear those words, but I want that too," he said, his voice steady, though his thoughts were racing. "I never thought I could feel this way about you, but I do. I want us to stay together. I want to make this work." Lyra's face lit up with a smile, and in that moment John felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of certainty, of belonging. They weren't just two people living together. They were two beings from different worlds, coming together and creating something new. It was a turning point in their relationship. No longer was Lyra a companion, a guest, or a foreign entity in his life. She was someone who had found a place in his heart, and he in hers. It was the beginning of something more, something real. From that moment on, they both knew that they weren't just sharing a space. They were sharing their lives, their hopes, and their future. And no matter what the world outside held, they would face it together, side by side. The days that followed felt like a dream to John. Everything was changing in a way he hadn't expected. Lyra, once just an alien companion, had become more than that. She had become his closest friend, someone he could rely on, someone who truly understood him in ways no one else ever had. It wasn't just about the physical presence anymore. It was about the deep, unspoken connection they shared. They had their ups and downs, of course. Adjusting to life together wasn't always easy. There were moments when Lyra would retreat into her thoughts, missing her home, or when John would feel frustrated with the chaos of his own life. But through it all, they found a way to work through the challenges. They learned from each other, grew together, and discovered things about themselves they hadn't known before. One evening, after a long day, John and Lyra were sitting together on the couch, watching the stars through the window. The apartment was quiet, the city lights twinkling below, but there was a calmness in the air, a sense of peace between them that had settled over time. "John," Lyra said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "I've been thinking." John turned his attention to her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "About what?" She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "About us. About everything that's happened. I know I came here to fulfill a role, to be your companion, but now it feels like something more. Something real." John's heart skipped a beat. He had felt it too, but hearing her say it aloud made it all the more real. "I know what you mean," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I didn't expect any of this. I thought I was just going to have someone around, but you've become more than just a companion to me. You've become my friend, and I don't want that to change." Lyra smiled, the soft light of the stars reflecting in her eyes. "I don't want it to change either," she said. "When I first came here, I thought I was just here to serve, to follow instructions, but now it's as if I found a part of me I didn't even know was missing. You've shown me so much about Earth, about humanity, and I've learned more about myself than I ever expected." John nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. It wasn't just the fact that Lyra had come so far. It was the fact that they had both changed. He had never imagined that someone he had purchased as a companion would become so important to him. But now there was no doubt in his mind. She was a part of his life in ways that went beyond any initial arrangement. "We've been through a lot together," John said, his voice full of sincerity. "And I'm glad you're here with me." "I don't know where I'd be without you." Lyra's smile widened, and for a moment they just sat there in silence, sharing the peaceful moment. It was clear that they had both found something in each other that they hadn't been able to find anywhere else. The next few days were filled with small but meaningful moments. They went on long walks through the city, discovering new places, together. They cooked meals, shared stories, and laughed at the smallest things. But there were also moments of reflection, where they both sat in silence thinking about the paths that had brought them together. One afternoon, as they sat by the window watching the rain fall softly outside, Lyra turned to John with a question that had been on her mind for some time. "John, do you ever wonder what the future holds? For both of us?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with curiosity. John thought for a moment before responding. "I used to wonder all the time, about what I was meant to do, where I was supposed to be. But now, with you here, I don't worry about it as much. I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, and that's with you." Lyra's expression softened, and she reached out, gently taking his hand. "I feel the same. I didn't know where I was supposed to be either, but now I know I belong here with you." For the first time since she had arrived, John truly understood what Lyra had meant when she spoke about finding a place for herself. She had come here expecting to be a companion, a helper, a tool in someone else's life. But now she was a part of his life, as important as anyone he had ever known. As the rain continued to fall outside, John and Lyra sat in silence, their hands still intertwined. There was a sense of comfort between them, a connection that didn't need words to be understood. It wasn't just about being together physically, it was about being there for each other emotionally, supporting one another through the challenges that life brought. In that moment, John realized that their bond had become something unbreakable. It wasn't about duty or obligation anymore. It was about love, trust, and a shared future that they both looked forward to. No matter what came their way, they would face it together. Lyra's presence had brought a new meaning to John's life. She wasn't just an alien companion anymore. She was a partner, a friend, and someone he cared for deeply. And as they sat, there in the quiet of their apartment, John knew that no matter how different their worlds were, they had found a place for each other in it. And that was all that mattered. The days continued to pass, but life with Lyra had taken on a new rhythm. There was no longer the feeling of awkwardness or uncertainty that had marked the early days of their arrangement. They had grown comfortable with each other, their bond becoming deeper with every shared experience, every laugh, every moment of quiet together. John had started to think about the future more often. It wasn't something he had done much before. He had always lived in the present, dealing with one day at a time, simply going through the motions. But now, with Lyra in his life, the idea of a future felt real, and it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about both of them. One afternoon, after a trip to a nearby cafe where they spent hours talking, John and Lyra were walking back home, enjoying the warmth of the sun as it began to dip lower in the sky. They had shared stories from their pasts, and as always, Lyra's calm presence gave John a sense of peace he hadn't known he needed. "Do you ever think about your home?" John asked as they strolled, glancing over at Lyra. He knew it was a question they had talked about before, but today it felt different. He was curious, not just about her memories, but about how she felt about Earth now. Lyra turned her gaze to the sky, a soft smile on her face. "Sometimes," she said, "I miss the stars. I miss the way everything felt connected. But I've learned that home isn't just a place. It's where you find the people who make you feel whole." John felt a warmth spread through him. It was more than just the comforting words. It was the way she said them with such sincerity. He realized that Lyra no longer felt like an outsider in his world. She had found a place here, not just in the apartment they shared, but in his life, in his heart. "Do you think we could have a future here?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with hope. It wasn't the first time she had asked, but something in the way she said it made John stop and really think. John stopped walking, his heart racing slightly as he turned to face her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, here, on Earth, together. I know things have been different, and I know I was brought here for a purpose, but I don't want that purpose to define me. I want to build something with you, something real, something lasting." John's breath caught in his throat. He had never truly considered a future beyond the present moment. But now that Lyra was asking, he realized how much he wanted that future to include her. It was as if everything had clicked into place. "I want that too," John said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I've never thought about the future before, but now, with you, I want to build something. I want to make a life together." Lyra's eyes brightened and she took his hand in hers. "Are you sure? We come from different worlds, John. I don't want you to feel obligated because of our circumstances." John squeezed her hand, his eyes meeting hers with sincerity. "I'm not doing this because I feel obligated. I'm doing this because I want to. I want to be with you, Lyra. No matter where you're from, no matter what's happened in the past, I just want us to be together." They stood there for a moment, the world around them seeming to fade away. It wasn't about the differences between their worlds. It wasn't about how they had met, or the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. It was about the here and now, about the connection they had forged through their shared experiences and mutual understanding. Lyra smiled, a smile that reached all the way to her eyes, and John knew in that moment that everything had changed. It wasn't just a temporary arrangement anymore. This was the beginning of something lasting. Over the next few weeks, their bond continued to grow. They began making plans for the future, small ones at first, like how they would decorate the apartment, what kind of trips they would take, and how they could continue to learn from each other. They started talking about what it meant to have a family, to build a home together, even if that home was on Earth, a place that was so far from Lyra's world. John found himself thinking about the things that mattered most to him. It wasn't his job, or his apartment, or anything he had once thought was important. It was Lyra. It was the life they could create together, the love they could share. For the first time in his life, he felt truly connected to someone. Not just in a casual way, but in a deep, meaningful way. As the months passed, they faced challenges, of course. There were still moments when Lyra felt homesick, when John had to balance his busy work life with the life he was building with her. But each challenge brought them closer, and each moment they shared together made them stronger. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the stars, Lyra turned to John, her face full of love and understanding. "I've learned so much here," she said softly. "But I've also realized that I don't need to be in my own world to feel at home. I've found a place here, with you." John smiled, his heart full. "I feel the same way, Lyra. I don't need anything else. As long as we're together, I'm home." And in that moment, they both knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. Together they had found their place in each other's lives, and no matter where they went, they would always be home.